My hand froze on the porcelain teacup, and I watched a single crack spread across the glaze like a vein under skin. I hadn't dropped it. I just set it down too hard. Behind me, in the hallway, I heard my daughter-in-law's voice drop to that low, silky register she used when she thought no one but her husband could hear. "She won't even notice," Vanessa whispered. "By the time she figures out what happened, we'll already be at sea." I didn't turn around. I didn't say a word. I just picked up my phone, opened the text thread with my son, and read it one more time. "Mom, you're not joining the cruise. Vanessa wants just family this year." I set the cup down again, gently this time, and I smiled. Because they had no idea what I'd already found in that hallway closet 3 weeks ago. My name is Diane Whitfield. I'm 64 years old, and 31 years ago, I started a catering company out of my kitchen with $400 and a stand mixer that still, to this day, sits on my counter. I built Whitfield's Kitchen into a company that now serves weddings, corporate galas, and state dinners across 3 counties. Today, it's worth just over $2.3 million. I built it while raising a son alone for 6 of those years, after my first husband walked out. I built it through 18-hour days, through a kitchen fire in 2003 that nearly ended everything, through arthritis in both hands that I never once let slow me down. I remarried 9 years ago. My husband Frank, a quiet, steady man who survived stage 3 colon cancer 4 years back and now, thank God, is in full remission. This cruise, an 11-day Alaska cruise for 12 people, cabins already booked, $46,800 charged to my card, was supposed to be a celebration of Frank's health, of the family I thought I still had. My son, Tyler, is 34. 3 years ago, I loaned him $150,000, interest-free, no contract beyond a handshake and a mother's trust, so he could open his own real estate brokerage. I never asked for a single payment before he was ready. That text message was the first sign that trust had been a mistake. It would not be the last. The dinner was 3 days before that text. Tyler had invited me and Frank over to talk logistics for the cruise. I remember exactly what Vanessa was wearing. A cream silk blouse I'd never seen before, the kind that costs more than I spend on groceries in a month, paired with a new diamond tennis bracelet catching the light every time she reached for her wine glass. She poured herself a second glass of Sancerre before I'd even taken my coat off, and she didn't offer me one. "Diane," she said, not looking up from her phone, "we're thinking the cruise should really just be us. Tyler's siblings, well, his cousins, and you know, the people who'll actually enjoy it." I remember the exact tone. Breezy, rehearsed, like she'd practiced it in a mirror. Tyler didn't correct her. He just refilled his own glass and said, "Mom, don't make this weird." I smiled, said I understood, and asked to use the bathroom. On my way back, I passed the hallway closet, the one where Tyler still keeps his old filing boxes from when he lived at home. The door was open 2 inches, and sitting right on top, in a manila folder with my name misspelled as Diane Whitfield, was a document titled Voluntary Transfer of Business Interest. I didn't touch it. Not yet. I just memorized the date on the cover page, and I walked back into that dinner and finished my glass of water like nothing in the world was wrong. 2 days later, I called my accountant, Marisol, who has handled Whitfield's kitchen books for 11 years, and asked her to quietly pull every record tied to the $150,000 I'd loaned Tyler. What she found made my stomach turn. Tyler had been telling his business partners, on record, in an email chain Marisol found through a shared vendor account, that the $150,000 was a gift from my mother, no strings, already settled. He was using that framing to raise additional investment, telling people his mother had fully divested from his company, which made him look independent, self-made. When I asked him about it over coffee, feigning idle curiosity, he barely blinked. "Mom, it's just optics," he said, stirring his espresso. "Investors don't like founders who still owe family money. It's a liquidity narrative thing. I was going to pay you back regardless. This is just how the paperwork needs to read for now." Liquidity narrative. I nodded slowly, told him that made sense, and thanked him for explaining it to me like I was slow. I went home and had Marisol pull everything again. That's when I found it wasn't just a narrative. He'd had a lawyer draft actual loan forgiveness paperwork, with my signature on it. a signature I never gave. I went back for that manila folder. Frank distracted Tyler with a question about the boat's insurance while I let myself into the house with the spare key I've had since he bought the place. The voluntary transfer of business interest wasn't about the loan at all. It was about Whitfield's Kitchen, my company. It named Vanessa as an incoming operations partner with signature authority over accounts, effective the moment I was deemed, and I quote the exact clause, medically or cognitively unable to continue independent management. There was a name at the bottom I recognized, Dr. Alan Reyes, a concierge physician whose practice, it turned out, specialized in fast-track capacity evaluations for elder care transitions. Vanessa's cousin, as I'd later learn, sat on his advisory board. They weren't planning to ask me to step back. They were planning to have me declared unfit. The following week, I dropped by unannounced to bring Frank's old fishing rod that Tyler had asked to borrow. The front door was unlocked. I let myself in quietly, a habit of 30 years as a mother who never quite stopped checking on her child. I heard them before I saw them. "She's going to make this trip miserable," Vanessa was saying, laughing into her wine. "Old bag still thinks she runs everything just because her name's on the checks. She'll be so confused by the time we're done with the paperwork," Tyler said. "She won't even remember she used to own the company." I stood in that front hallway for 11 full seconds, my hand on the wall, and I let myself feel it. Just once. Then I walked back out, quiet as I'd come in, and I texted Tyler that I'd left the fishing rod on the porch. Vanessa had, for the past year, been helping with the bookkeeping at Whitfield's Kitchen, a favor she'd insisted on, waving off my offer to pay her for it. Marisol and I sat down with a forensic accountant, a woman named Priya Anand who'd worked white-collar fraud cases for a regional bank before going independent, and asked her to trace every entry Vanessa had touched. $41,300 had been routed, in small increments over 14 months, into an LLC called Cascade Event Consulting, an LLC whose sole listed officer was Vanessa. When I mentioned, gently, over lunch, that I'd noticed some confusing numbers in the books and wondered if she could explain them, she barely paused over her salad. "Oh, that's just categorization," she said smoothly. "Cascade handles overflow vendor payments. It's a pass-through entity for tax efficiency. Totally standard in event services. I can walk you through the ledger reconciliation anytime, Diane. It's really not complicated." Pass-through entity. Ledger reconciliation. I told her that sounded very professional, and that I trusted her completely. I did not trust her at all. And Priya confirmed within a week that Cascade Event Consulting had never serviced a single vendor payment for anyone. It existed for one purpose. The last piece came together 4 days before the sailing date. I found, through my own credit card portal, that the cabin assignments had been quietly changed. My name and Frank's name moved from the balcony suite I'd booked to an interior cabin 2 decks down, while Tyler and Vanessa upgraded themselves into our original suite. On my card, without my knowledge, and buried in Vanessa's shared family calendar, an old account she'd forgotten I still had view access to from years ago when I used to help coordinate Tyler's schedule, was an appointment 2 days before departure. DW Wellness Check, Dr. Reyes, home visit. They weren't going to wait for the cruise. They were coming to my house. I made a decision that night, sitting across from Frank at our kitchen table, the same table where I'd once counted out $400 in cash to start my company. "I'm going to let them think they've won," I told him. I started small. I began repeating myself in conversation with Tyler, asking the same question about the cruise twice within a single phone call. I let my hand tremble, just slightly, when I signed a routine delivery receipt in front of Vanessa. I started using a cane I didn't need for my hip, I told them, leaning on it a little more heavily each time Vanessa was in the room. I stopped correcting Tyler when he mispriced things at the company. I let Vanessa help me look for a document I already knew the location of, watching her rifle through my files with false confusion on my face, murmuring, "Oh, I really don't know where I put anything anymore." Inside, I was cataloging every second of it. I told myself, the weaker they believe I am, the closer they'll bring the trap to me. A confident woman gets watched carefully. A confused old woman gets handed the rope she'll use to tie them up herself. Frank hated it. I don't like watching you shrink for them, he said. I'm not shrinking, I told him. I'm aiming. I called Priya and my attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Renata Cole, and we built the trap in 3 pieces. First, the bait. I accidentally left a folder on my kitchen counter, in plain view, containing a fabricated draft of a new will, one that named Vanessa as executor and left her 40% of Whitfield's kitchen. It was fake. Every figure in it was wrong on purpose, seeded with details only someone who read it closely and acted on it could later be tied to. Second, the wire. I agreed to the wellness check with Dr. Reyes, and I wore a small recorder, provided by Renata, clipped inside the collar of my cardigan. Third, the watch. I had a discreet camera installed in my own living room, the same room where Vanessa always insisted on helping me with paperwork, feeding to Frank's phone in the next room. The wellness check came on a gray Tuesday afternoon. I sat in my armchair, cane against my knee, playing gently confused as Dr. Reyes asked me the date, asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens, asked me questions clearly designed less to assess me than to produce a report that said what Vanessa needed it to say. Under the side table, my phone buzzed once. A text from Frank in the next room, recording clean. She's on camera pushing him to phrase it more conclusively. I answered every question with just enough hesitation to be useful, and not one shred more. The Bon Voyage dinner was held 4 nights later at the Cedarbrook Country Club, 60 guests, white tablecloths, my company's own catering staff working the room, a detail Vanessa hadn't thought twice about, since I always did the family's events for free. Tyler stood to give a toast about new beginnings and family taking care of family. Vanessa sat beside him in a burgundy gown, that same tennis bracelet catching the chandelier light, and when I rose from my seat, cane in hand, she actually smiled. "Diane, sweetheart, you don't need to say anything," she said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, patting my arm like I was a child. "Why don't you sit back down and let Tyler finish?" "I will," I said. "Just one thing first." My voice didn't rise. It never does when it matters most. 3 weeks ago, I found a document in Tyler's hallway closet that named Vanessa as an incoming operations partner in my company, effective the day I was declared incompetent. I have that document. The room went quiet in that particular way only a room full of people trying not to look interested can go quiet. $41,300 has moved out of Whitfield's kitchen over the past 14 months into an LLC owned solely by Vanessa. I have every bank record, prepared by a forensic accountant who's already shared her findings with the district attorney's financial crimes unit. Vanessa's smile hadn't moved, but her knuckles had gone white around her wine glass. Tyler told his investors the $150,000 I loaned him was a gift, and forged loan forgiveness paperwork with a signature that is not mine, which any handwriting analyst will confirm in about 11 minutes. I reached into my handbag and set the fake will on the table, the one seated just for them, and I watched Vanessa's eyes flick to it with instant, unmistakable recognition. And 9 days ago, in my own living room, on camera, I listened to a doctor being coached to write a capacity evaluation that said whatever the two of you needed it to say. I picked up that fake will, the bait they'd already acted on, and I tore it once, cleanly, down the middle, the sound sharp enough to carry across 60 silent guests. That's the only signature of mine either of you will ever get. At the far doors, 2 men in plain clothes stepped forward, Detective Marcus I.B. from the Financial Crimes Unit, whom Renata had arranged to attend quietly. He didn't shout. He simply asked Vanessa to step outside to answer some questions about Cascade Event Consulting. I sat back down, folded my hands, and let my son watch his wife be walked out of the room he'd built his whole toast around. Within 6 weeks, Vanessa was formally charged with embezzlement and wire fraud tied to the $41,300 routed through Cascade Event Consulting. She took a plea deal requiring full restitution and 18 months of probation. Dr. Alan Reyes lost his medical license for 6 months, pending review after Renata filed a formal complaint with the state board, citing the recorded coaching session. His concierge practice quietly shut its doors 2 months later. Tyler was not criminally charged, but the forged loan forgiveness paperwork became public knowledge among his investors within days. His brokerage lost 3 of its 5 founding partners inside a month, and he was forced to personally repay the $150,000 in full, with interest, under a court-supervised repayment plan Renata insisted on. The marriage did not survive the fallout. Vanessa filed for divorce from a rented apartment across town 4 months later. I want to be clear about one thing. None of my employees, none of my catering staff, none of the vendors who'd worked with Cascade unknowingly lost a single dollar or a single day of pay. I personally covered every gap Vanessa's scheme had left in our books, and I gave every staff member who'd worked that country club dinner a $500 bonus for grace under pressure, the card read. The cruise sailed 2 weeks later than planned. Frank and I took it with my actual family, my sister, my nieces, 2 of my longtime employees and their kids, who'd never once had a vacation like that in their lives. It was late October, 7 months after the country club, when Tyler showed up at my door in the rain, no coat, car keys in hand, and nothing else. His apartment building, he told me through the screen door, had given him a 3-day notice. He hadn't made rent in 2 months. "Mom," he said, and his voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard since he was 12 years old. "I don't have anywhere else to go." I stood in that doorway for a long moment, the porch light catching the rain running off the gutter behind him, and I thought about a manila folder in a hallway closet, and a fake will torn clean down the middle, and a doctor being coached in my own living room. "You always had somewhere to go, Tyler," I said. "You chose this one instead." Then I closed the door, gently, and I turned the deadbolt. Frank was waiting in the kitchen with 2 cups of tea, the same stand mixer from 31 years ago, sitting quiet on the counter behind him. "You okay?" he asked. "I will be," I said, and I meant it. For the first time in a long while, I actually am. Here's what I learned, the hard way, at 64 years old. The people who count on you not to notice are usually the ones you should be watching the closest. Love your family, but never let them mistake your kindness for blindness, because the moment you do, some of them will start planning around it. Have you ever had to play weak to protect what you'd spent a lifetime building? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. If this story hit home, hit like, subscribe for more, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today.